Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to AP Vocabulary. We are talking about the Ottoman Empire today from 1750 to 1900 and what kind of changes they went through. And we're going to focus on four vocabulary words. We're going to be looking at Mahmud II. We're going to look at the Tanzimat Reforms, which were brought about by Mahmud II. We will then look at Abdul Hamid and the Young Turks. So those four vocab words will also have four key questions. So the four key questions that we'll be paying attention to are some of the political, economic, and military setbacks of the late 18th century Ottoman Empire, some of Mahmud II's reforms that he made in the Ottoman Empire, how Abdul Hamid basically undid some of those reforms and kept some others, and then why the Young Turks decided to overthrow the Sultan Abdul Hamid and put themselves into power. So we'll look at those four things, and we'll start with some of the problems that were being faced by the Ottoman Empire in the late 18th century. So this is the late 1700s. So first of all, politically, there were power struggles going on, not only between the military elite, but also the religious elite, the Muslim scholars. The tax system was starting to break down and corrupt, and people were local leaders were starting to kind of skim some money off for themselves instead of it going to the Sultan. So politically, there was power struggles happening. Economically, the Ottoman Empire at this time was being impacted by the West and Westernization, especially industrialized goods from the West were competing with local merchants and artisans and winning because they were mass produced and cheaper. And so local Ottomans throughout the Ottoman Empire were having a difficult time competing with these, and so their economy was starting to go down. And then militarily, there was a few key losses to the Ottoman Empire as time went on. They were losing area and land in the Balkans. They lost Greece. They had controlled Greece for a while, but the Greeks gained back their freedom, and Russia was encroaching from the north. And so essentially the Ottoman Empire was starting to shrink back a little bit territorially. So all of this led to the need for reform, which brings us to Mahmud II. So Mahmud II was the Sultan from, let me look at my dates here, basically the 1830s, 1820s until the 1870s, and was responsible for bringing about reforms to the empire. Mahmud II's reforms were essentially Western-style reforms. So first and foremost, he instituted military reforms in order to make the Ottoman Empire have a more modern military. And so this meant not only armaments and weapons, but also bringing in military officers from the West to help train these officers. Also instituted what was called the Tanzimat Reforms. And the Tanzimat Reforms were aimed, again, at making the Ottoman Empire more like the West. So that was essentially what the Tanzimat Reforms were, as they were attempts to reform and westernize the Ottoman Empire. So what? So what did these Tanzimat Reforms consist of? It consisted of kind of a boost in education, especially in science and math, a boost in the telegraph wires and rail lines laid across the Ottoman Empire. As far as politics go, putting in a constitutional type of government and reforms to law to provide, at least on paper, more equality within the empire. And some of these reforms, essentially, many of the conservatives within the Ottoman Empire felt like they went too far, like they were basically forcing the Ottoman Empire to be a little bit too much like the West and giving the West a little bit too much leverage in the Ottoman Empire. So that brings in Abdul Hamid, and Abdul Hamid took power uh, after Mahmud II, and Abdul Hamid was able to kind of return the Sultan to what your book refers to as despotic absolutism, which basically means that he gets to make decisions on his own, and some of these decisions were somewhat brutal. So, in reality, what that meant was he repealed the Constitution. He took away constitutional rule in favor of absolute power for the Sultan. In reality, a lot of the educational and infrastructure reforms and military reforms that were made under the Tanzimat Reforms of his predecessor, Mahmud II, he kept those, and he wanted to make sure that the Ottoman Empire was still strong in that regard, but severely started to restrict personal freedoms. And so that constitution, repealing the constitution, essentially allowed for him to take away free speech, to put people into jail who were political opponents, and to basically attack the intellectuals and elites within society and kind of get rid of them, which again brought about the Young Turks. So the Young Turks attempted a coup. A coup is a government overthrow. And the Young Turks, by 1908, they were known as the Ottoman Society for Union and Progress. And they had decided to get rid of this despotic absolutist czar and reinstitute the Constitution. And so reinstate the Constitution, maybe not reinstitute, but that was the goal of the Young Turks, was to bring back the constitutional government and to hold on to the empire in the face of what they saw as deterioration at the hands of a poor leadership. Now, the Young Turks were not able to hold on to power for too long because of the outbreak of World War I and the Ottoman Empire being pulled into war, and essentially it sealed the deal for the Ottoman Empire. But those were kind of the issues that were leading up to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and what they were attempting to do to stop it. So keep the awesomeness, and I will talk to you again very soon.